Hi, everyone. Welcome to Looking Up. This is a podcast for Christian women. If you are new here, we welcome you to our little chat. We're going to just have maybe it's not going to be a very fun discussion. We might have some memories going on today, but we will have a good discussion, no doubt. We're going to talk about discipline methods and some things that worked for us and maybe some things that didn't work. Do you have any things that didn't work for you? Did you think about any of those? I
You want
mean,
me to give that away
everything.
right out of the gate?
This was a topic that was requested, so I will share that right off the top and just say that this is something that you and I have talked about. It's probably something we should maybe make a topic one day, but it's not something that we really thought we would, it's not really something that's fun to talk about, but it is a necessary thing. And we have also both reached the age where we've been there, done that. And so hopefully we'll have some suggestions and maybe some tips and maybe some things that might be helpful for those of you who are in the middle of discipline. And, it doesn't ever really end because we always have that whole self-discipline thing too, right?
Well, it's just hard to pick a topic like this without feeling presumptuous.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
we were such perfect parents. Do it like we did.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we will come to a point where we will make that disclaimer that we were not. Anyway,
Absolutely.
yeah, I am Carla Moore and Kathy Pollard is on the other end. She's in Kentucky and I'm in Texas, and we just get together once a week and talk about things that are important and things that hopefully will point you toward the Lord and help you to look up at things that are important, spiritually important. And I just value this time every week because you can't always have deep conversations with people. And I always look forward to having these conversations with Kathy. So welcome to Looking Up. So what's going on over there? Are you still frozen?
No, no. We have, oh man, if you can't tell from my grin, we have had, this is our third day now of mild sunny weather, and it is just glorious. I mean, I keep coming up with excuses to go outside and walk to the mailbox and back because it feels so good. The sun on my skin, and I've got the sliding glass door open and all the breeze coming in. You can hear the birds singing. I mean, it's just, I know it's a little false spring, haha, cold air is coming again,
Yeah.
but I don't care. I'm making the most of it. I love it. So we have, yeah, we have teeny tiny still little patches here and there of snow, believe it or not, but.
In the shady patches. Well, that's
In the
quite
shady
different than
patches, yeah.
from last week and talking about slip sliding around the car to get Neil's birthday presents.
Oh, I know. I know. It's way better, way different this week. And it's good because it's been kind of a busy time since the last time we talked. My stepdad went into the hospital for heart procedures and he was in there for a week at the Centennial in Nashville. And Um, my sister had her art exhibition finally, and they had to reschedule that because of the bad weather. And so that was Saturday. And I thought I'd show you the little, you see that little booklet that featured all the artists that were there. And she's got let me see if I can find, here's her page real quick with her artwork on it that they
Do it all.
yeah, exhibited. So like here is I think she called that one Eye of the Tiger, and I can't remember what that one was called.
Mhm. She's so talented.
She really is. But we showed up there and it was so fun just walking around. They didn't put them together. Everybody's artwork was scattered. So you could submit two pieces and they weren't most of the time side by side. So it was fun just walking around looking for them, and then Um, we oohed and awed over it for a while, or I did, and then we kind of hovered. I was like, let's hover nearby so we can see people's reactions and hear what they're saying. And Christy was talking about how weird that was, to watch people slow down in front of her work
Yeah.
and make a comment or, talk about it. And but it was very favorably received, we shall say. And so I also wanted to show you, she already has her little business card.
Oh, I
Christy
love
Lee
that those are
Artistries.
square now.
Well,
I've seen
I know she's so hip. She likes to stay up with the times. Mine are just like the traditional,
yeah.
but it's ChristyLeeArtistries.com. So Lee is her middle name. So Christy Lee is how she's signing her work, but I'm so proud of her.
Was she okay with you sharing that she's going to start selling it? Or
I
did you
hope
get
so.
trouble? You did.
There was something. I forget what I said on here when I hesitated before I said it, and she was like, "You need to go back and do a follow-up apology."
Well, maybe on the sly you can share, like, is she going to sell them online or do you have to
Oh
go to,
yeah, she's gonna sell them online.
well, maybe you'll have to just share next week where
I
to do that.
I definitely will. I definitely will.
Um,
But it was
at it.
funny because meanwhile, Christy's, she gets people asking her, like commissioning work from her. People ask her to paint things for them of their pets, and she's done a great job with that. Nobody has ever asked me that. And then she gets her art exhibited at this little gallery. Obviously that's never happened to me. And then I come up with this genius idea that since Valentine's Day is coming up, for our little business, I usually paint watercolor bookmarks to tuck into the orders. Well, I thought I'll do like a little watercolor card to tuck in there if anybody's ordering something for Valentine. And it turned out so bad. It's like it looks like something. It looks like something
Yeah,
one of
they're
my
not
grandkids.
bad.
No, they're bad. It looks like something one of my grandkids would try and paint. So, keeping it completely real. Sometimes I show things on here that I've painted because I'm pretty proud of them. And this this idea tanked so bad I didn't even follow through with it. I was like, no, that is not happening. So,
No,
meanwhile,
I think you should tuck them
there's
in.
art is exhibited in a gallery, and I can't even paint a
No, I think you should
heart.
tuck them in orders and there'll be like a limited edition of, remember when I did those? I think it's great.
Oh,
Congrats to Christy. I think that's a fabulous thing, and I'll look forward to seeing what all she has to sell.
yeah, so fun. So proud of her.
Yeah. Well, I went on Saturday night with Karen Peroni and her daughter Amanda to see The Sound of Music, the production. It's like a Broadway production that travels around in Austin, and it was a lot of fun. It was kind of a surprise because I was like, I filled in for someone who couldn't go, but I was glad to do it. And it was fabulous. It was fabulous. That's my favorite movie ever.
Mine
And so,
too.
yeah, I was a little bit hesitant, like, how are they going to ruin it? Because all of my childhood memories of The Sound of Music are attached to those songs. But it was really good. They did a great job. We had good seats, but still, 20 rows back, so I couldn't see close up of their face. So, it wasn't Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer, but they had fabulous singing voices and just very enjoyable. There was one part that she did when she's teaching them to sing doe a deer, female deer, and she's making hand motions for doe, fa, mi. So, she was doing all these little hand motions with every time she would say the word. And I
Hmm.
had never seen, she didn't do that in the movie. But I asked Amanda about that because she was in choir and she said, yeah, it's the shape notes or that there's a hand signal or sign. And that when she was in high school, that her choir teacher required for them to make those hand signs for each of those notes.
I had
That
no
was
idea.
completely new to me. I've never heard of that
I've
before.
never heard of that either. I'm writing that down. I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, like I was thinking, is it like ASL, like sign language for music? And I don't think so, but it maybe it helps when they're conducting music to,
Mhm.
the conductor uses whatever they're supposed to be singing. But anyway, it was a lot of fun.
Interesting. Do you remember that live version that came out a few years ago? I'm trying to remember who. It wasn't Carrie Underwood.
Carrie Underwood.
It was Carrie Underwood. I didn't
Did
like
not like
it.
it.
No. I feel like I shouldn't say that because we're smack dab in the middle of our negativity challenge while we're recording this, but
Well, I mean, it's just a fact. I don't think you're being negative about it. You're just,
yeah, I wasn't crazy about it. Did
yeah.
you like it?
I don't remember. I may have turned it on, but I don't remember much about it. So I probably just didn't because, like I said, I don't want things to mess with my
Yeah.
childhood memories of The Sound of Music.
Yeah. Hmm.
So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And when I was out later than I've been out in, I can't remember the last time. I didn't get home until like 12:15. So that's
Whoa,
way late for me.
party girl.
I know. Pretty crazy. What else has been going on in your life?
Well, Saturday we also celebrated Rich's. He's our oldest grandson. He turned
Finally got
3.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he turned 3, so we were able to celebrate him. And those pizza rolls. Emily made some of those, but she put ricotta
Hmm,
in hers, which I never even thought to do. I don't know why, because that's in like calzones and things like that. But it was so, so good. But she sent this little, I was going to share, it's a little braggy.
it's
Excuse
okay. You can
me.
brag.
Okay. She shared this little text this morning. Our word for the week is generous. And after learning about Mary anointing Jesus, Rich said, I will be helpful and I will be God's son. I want to be God's son because he's so big.
Just love little 3-year-old sentences.
Isn't that cute?
It's very cute.
She
He's
just
very,
happened to send it right before we got on here, so I thought, I'm sharing it.
yeah. It's always interesting to see what kids draw from and what and where do they, how do their little minds work? But,
Hmm.
but obviously he's getting it. He's getting it.
He's a cutie pie, for
Well, I
sure.
had my second hair treatment. Can you tell any difference?
Yeah, it looks good.
It's a little darker. She didn't do anything to the roots, so this is all me.
Oh,
But she,
nice.
because they're still dark underneath, she went and found the dark and then did low lights there. So when I came home yesterday, John said, I feel like I'm getting a new wife every month or so because I it doesn't look super different to me, but it's more of the ashy brown as opposed to more less blonde, I guess. So, and
It
she
looks
said
good.
maybe that's the last one. She said maybe we can just leave it, maybe just do a little toner or something. So I'm excited to not, hopefully not have to do it anymore. Just
It's
let it
looking
grow
really
out from
good.
here. Yeah.
Hmm.
And you're right. It's been freeing to not worry about my roots.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way you're doing it is, I think, a much easier transition because you don't have the awkwardness of the grow out and
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it was a little awkward the first time I showed up, I guess at Focal Point mostly because well, Heather Hahn told me that I had this whole conversation with Kevin. I was telling him about something, standing there next to him, and she told me later that when I left, he said, "Was that Carla?" Because I look different. So I don't know how many other people were like, I don't know if that was her or not, but anyway,
But it's a good different. You looked good before, you look good now. You
thanks.
know,
Yeah, thanks.
you're
Come on.
welcome. You're welcome. So
Yeah.
I'm going to a favorite things party tomorrow night. I will not stay out till midnight. But I was
In
gonna share.
February?
What's that?
In February? I mean, I
Yes,
think
it's
the
like
Christmas.
they're like doing like a gallon tons
Well, that's fun.
kind of thing with it. But I can share what I'm gonna bring. You know, I stress a little bit about that because I don't want to show up with the dud thing, and
That
but
no one chooses.
yes, by the time this comes out, it'll be over. But I've mentioned it as one of my favorite things on here before. It's one of those travel, like holds all your cosmetics and jewelry and shampoo and conditioner and stuff. But I love these things and I use mine all the time. And because it opens all the way up and it's so big that it
Yeah.
carries everything in here. And it's big enough for lotions and shampoos, and it's got smaller pockets for jewelry and razors and all your makeup. And so I've got one of these, and then I also added those Grace and Stella, like under eye patches. I
Mhm.
put one of each of those inside of it too. So
I've never seen that. I
hopefully,
don't think you've shared that before.
I think I shared it as one of my favorite things before. I first got it right before we went on the cruise because I was reading about how tight it was on the cruise ship rooms, which ended up being not that tight. But you can keep all your stuff in here and there's a hook so you can just hang it up on the wall. But now, every time I go anywhere, I take this thing and I love it. I just hook it up on the bathroom, the hook on the back of the bathroom door, and all my stuff is right there by the sink and out of the way, and it's perfect. So
Because it doesn't look too bulky.
it's
Mine is
not
more like
bulky
a
at all.
square,
Mhm.
and it's a big square, and so I always have to think about in my suitcase where it's going to fit. But it seems like that could just lay on top.
When my sister and I went down to Florida together in October, it was funny because I had mine hanging up on the towel rod in the bathroom, and she has one too. So she had hers hanging up, and we had them side by side. Here's all my stuff, here's all her stuff.
Easter's.
Yeah, which is way better than all that stuff on the bathroom sink, you
Yeah.
know? So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Well, you have to send me a link to that because I'm still in search of the perfect one. And just traveling, you don't have, I like that there's you can hang it too because mine sits on the counter and sometimes there's no room on the counter for it. So,
Yeah, and that's what I love about it is you can just keep everything in there and hang it up and all of your stuff is just right there. And it has
yeah.
lots of different pockets and zippers and sizes and in fact, this travel makeup bag itself comes in different sizes. Like if you
Okay.
want a smaller one, you can get a smaller one. And
Yeah.
it comes in different colors. There's this kind of blush color, but there's also they have black. Actually, there's other colors. I don't remember what they are, but
Amazon,
yes.
of course. Everything comes from Amazon.
Yeah, I'll share the link.
Did you know their logo, Amazon, that has the arrow underneath?
Hmm.
You know what that's for?
It's a smiley face and it's on its way to you.
It's pointing to the Z in Amazon. So they have everything from A to Z. I
Oh,
heard that the other day.
that makes way more sense than what I said.
You learn something new every day.
That's right.
No, I mean, it is a smile. They said it is a smile, but it's intended to say we have everything from A to Z, and they really do. Okay.
Interesting. Hmm.
All right.
Did you know that you can use either side of aluminum foil?
I guess I'd never paid attention.
Well, I'd always been told you use the matte side. You know, there's a shiny side and a flat side, and the shiny side you keep on the outside, and the matte side is the part that if you have it covering food, that's the part you put next to the food. I'd always heard that, and I've mentioned this before on here. We subscribe to Epic newspaper, and one of the articles in this week's paper was about things that health things that we think we know
Yeah.
that aren't actually true. And that was one of them. You know, it doesn't matter which side of the aluminum foil you use, they're both made of exactly the same thing.
Well, it kind of makes sense that the shiny side might reflect, but I've never paid attention. When you pull it out, the matte side's on the bottom, so naturally, I think it kind of covers the food, but I guess I've never really thought about that, but good to know. Now everybody's learned two things today.
Well,
Hopefully there'll be a little bit more than just that.
yeah,
So we're getting ready to go. We're going to go tomorrow. Yeah, today's Wednesday. Tomorrow through Saturday for the Katy Rodeo because Emmy's going to be riding again. And Emmy and Clara are both going to do the mutton busting. And I have to say that's probably what I'm looking forward to more than anything else is
cute.
that is so adorable. Just
Mm.
there's something about a kid hanging on for dear life. I don't know why. Maybe there's something wrong with me that it enjoys that so much. But a kid with a helmet hanging on for dear life on the side of a sheep, and gradually they're like sideways and tumble off. But it's just so cute. And I think because they're just little. But Claire
Yeah.
is super excited about it because she didn't get to do it last year. But
Oh, makes for
yeah,
lots of good photo ops, huh?
yeah, for sure. But we'll be doing that this weekend. You got anything else, or should we dive in?
I think we should dive in.
Yeah. Hopefully we won't over over say things. But anyway, like we said earlier, this topic came about because we were asked about it, and I won't say who it was, but someone asked if we had done a podcast specifically about discipline. And there's some. I mean, we talked about in the bringing up boys and the Dear Younger Me episode, but we've never done one just about disciplining children. And as a disclaimer, of course, you and I did not do. I mean, I did most everything just right, didn't you?
Yeah, well, yeah.
No, I mean, we each have three boys. How old are your boys now? Now you have to do the math.
I know. 31. Dale just turned, no, that's not right. Dale just turned 30. They're like
Yeah,
early
they're around there
30s and
somewhere.
late 20s.
I always have to do the math. Jordan is my oldest is 37, which means Jake is 35 and Micah is 28. So, it's been a few years, but I do remember a lot of consternation and prayers and frustration and insert whatever word you want to there in parenting is it's hard. But I also just, and I don't mean this in any kind of a bragging way, and I know you wouldn't either, but they're all six of them productive members of society. and they're good men. And I look at them and I think, the Lord had his hand in their rearing in all of them. And I know, and I'm thankful because they're responsible and they're not perfect. And I think that they arrived at where they are because of the grace of God and not always because of the ways that we disciplined or handled or raised them. I have plenty of regrets, and most of them have to do with my own self-control in hard situations and all. But I'm grateful that they've grown into good, responsible men, and I know yours have as well. So I guess I say that mainly to say that not necessarily that we did things that were right, but I think that I know that both of us, the Bible was our parenting guidebook and we took it seriously. And I want to encourage everyone who is in the midst of parenting to really look at that. And you don't really need anything else. It's helpful to have other things, other resources, of course, but the Bible has a lot to say about discipline, but it also leaves it open to you to decide how to enforce things. So anyway, all of that, um, of course, we made mistakes. We are not here to say we did everything perfectly, but I think we do have a little bit of credibility, I guess. And I hope everyone understands what I mean by that. Not that we have things to brag about, but that we've done it. We've been there. We've done that. And we have good kids. So maybe we did a few things right anyway, not even though we didn't do everything right. Have I covered all that? You're looking at me like, wrap it up, Carla. Enough
No,
about the regret.
I just feel like, you know, I don't know how to, I'm not trying to undo everything that you just said.
Go ahead and undo it.
I feel like when you're bringing up children, you don't have all the answers. You have the word of God and you have the guidance that comes from it, but you're learning your children. You're learning what works and what doesn't, and you're just making the best of what you've got. Lots of wisdom seeking and love and patience and all of those things. And I was just thinking how funny it is to me that um, on the other side of all of that, when the kids have left and now we're on the other side of that, I heard things after the fact.
Yeah.
So stuff that I never knew about
Mhm.
and that I had no idea was going on, which looking back makes me feel like I was pretty clueless in some areas. So I know what you're saying that, they're all they're faithful Christians and they survived. That's how I'm putting it.
Mhm.
My kids are faithful Christians and they survived.
They survived our parenting.
But I feel like anything that I'll be contributing will just be like, here's what the Bible says about it. So whatever you're worried about or wrestling with, let's talk about what God's word has to say. And if you keep that as your guiding star, how imperfectly or not you discipline your children, God is there to fill in the gaps. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. The grace of God and
yes.
his grace towards us, it helps us to understand how to have that grace towards our children. But you're right. I mean, when you start out, we're so young and
Yeah.
we pray a lot for guidance and for God to give us wisdom, which he says he will. But we'll talk about more of that in a minute. You're right. It's daunting, but it's rewarding and it's not always fun. But but the goal is to help children become God-fearing, God-respecting Christians who will help others to be the same way. So
Mhm.
hopefully I haven't butchered what I am. I think I'm just making the disclaimer that we don't have all the answers for sure, but God does, and he will help us through it. And I
Yeah.
also think things have changed too, because when we were raising kids, we had our moms and our grandmothers and people around us who maybe didn't always perfectly give us every answer, but a lot of times we would ask for help. What did you do in this situation? And we had the word and we talked about, I feel like we talked about parenting maybe a little bit more in classes than we do now, because I think that's a result of social media and the pressures that we feel. Um, and even today, the way that we're a little bit hesitant to say how some of the things that we might feel because everyone has an opinion.
Mhm.
And a lot of times those opinions come from people that may or may not, we don't know if they know what they're talking about, and it doesn't come from the Lord. Sometimes it does, but I think I'm throwing that out there because I think that our resources were a little bit different than the resources that young parents have today. And they have all this huge circle of their own age group who are in the middle of it all together. And I think they're just hearing conflicting things from different resources. So just want to remind everyone to go back to the Bible and go back to God and remember that he's going to be the one to give you wisdom when you ask for it. And when you humble yourself to realize that you don't have all the answers. So define discipline.
Me?
Yeah, what
Like
do you,
that, you
hmm,
know, I've always heard the illustration of the twig, that when it grows, it naturally wants to bend in one direction or another, but you train it to grow straight by staking it down, and as that tree grows, the stakes change, because it's got a natural bent, but you're trying to train it to go straight. And I always think about discipline in that way is, kids have a natural bent,
mhm.
and the Bible says foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. And so our job as parents is to keep them straight, on the straight path. And we're going to have to do that as they grow in different ways, watching them and training them. And that's how I kind of think of discipline. I'm sure it has an official definition that you're going to share with us.
I have never heard that, and I love that. I think that's fantastic. But it's
Thanks.
so true because like you're saying, it changes as they grow. Well, the official, I mean, when I look it up, it means an act of guiding, the practice of training people to obey, to train or develop by instruction, and especially exercise and self-control. But I think sometimes we think that discipline and punishment are synonymous, and they're not. I mean, there's so many other ways of disciplining that don't involve any kind of punishment. So I want to make sure we clarify that we're not talking about punishment. Sometimes we may bring that up in this podcast, but we want to focus on ways and methods of discipline
Mhm.
rather than just talking about punishment. So some of the things that the Bible has to say, and I'm going to start with the New Testament because that's the way I wrote it down. But Ephesians 6:4, we've all heard this. Fathers, do not provoke your children. The old King James said wrath, but a lot of the newer ones say, don't provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So right there, right off the bat, there's one that talks about that parents have a responsibility not to be the cause of their children's frustration and their anger. And so that to me indicates a lot that when you're talking about training and staking that little twig and that branch, not to push too hard, not to do something that's going to break that twig, break that child. So don't provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in God's discipline and his instruction. And just jump in whenever you have anything to say.
Thanks.
Hebrews 12:5, there's a whole section on talking about discipline there, but I'm just going to read a few of the verses. Hebrews 12:5, my son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. So, there we also learn that discipline comes from love. And then when you skip down to verse 11, all discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. Yet to those who have been trained by it afterwards, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. And what parent who's trying to go by the Bible has not thought of that passage or maybe even quoted it to their child while they're in the middle of some kind of discipline or punishment? But nobody wants it. I mean, I'm almost 58 years old, and sometimes I'm disciplined by the Lord, and I do not enjoy it at all. But I have grown to understand that this is teaching me something. And that's our job as parents to help our kids understand that, yes, this is something you don't like, whether it's discipline or a form of punishment. And I'm not doing it because I am mad at you. I'm not doing it because I despise you. I'm doing it because you need it and because I want you to learn peace and righteousness. So,
Yeah, I'll jump in right here.
okay.
Um, that verse is so good, and I think that what parents understand that kids don't is that the difficulty of the discipline in the moment brings the joy later. It creates the home environment that children love
Right.
and crave, and harmony and joy and peace, all those beautiful things that you want your kids to look back on as adults. This is the kind of home that I grew up in, and in the moment, like the Bible says, it doesn't seem very pleasant in the moment, but what they don't understand is they're going to love the result that that brings in the home. And even kids are smart enough to figure that out. I can remember our boys, Gary brought this up the other day, in fact. Every now and then, if they go hang out with somebody else, in somebody else's home where there was no discipline whatsoever, and I'm not trying to do that whole we were disciplined and perfect. I'm just saying there's an obvious difference in a home where discipline is attempted and discipline is not attempted at all. And even children can pick up on that and feel the tension in the environment, feel the disharmony, and it's not pleasant. It's not a pleasant experience. So that's another thing that we can, remind our kids of is we're doing this because we love you, and you're gonna be grateful for this on the other side of things. When you grow up and you look back, you'll understand and you'll be thankful.
And along with that, I think is the responsibility to create the kind of home that they know that they're loved and they know
Mhm.
that they're protected. And so those boundaries that we're trying to instill, they can trust us that it's maybe, no, I don't want you to punish me right now. But I understand, and maybe not at 4 years old, they're not going to quite understand that. But as they
Mhm.
grow and we're consistent with that love and with that uh, enforcing those boundaries, then they grow to understand, okay, it's for my own good. And they might not be able to vocalize it, but they'll feel it.
Mhm.
Okay, so the next one is Proverbs 22:6. We all know this one. Excuse me. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it. This one's a hard one because a lot of times we look back on that, if we have grown children who are not faithful to God and we think, what did I do wrong? And we won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but this is a proverb, which means that they're generally true. And I don't, it's hard to say something like that about something that's in the Bible, but a proverb is a little bit different. And John gave a lesson on this 2 years ago, I believe, at PTP. And if I can, I'll link it. But he did such a great job on it. And there's a lot of talk about in the way he should go. What does that mean? And some of the things I've read, what you're talking about, the way the twig is bent, train up a child in the way he should go, or the way, how is he bent? Is he someone that needs a lot of encouragement? Then provide a lot of encouragement. Is he someone that needs a lot of structure? Then provide a lot of structure. So train up a child in the way that personally he should go. So that's something that we can talk about. Probably should talk about that in a maybe a whole different episode. But when you think about a child that does not grow up and is not the person that we hoped that they would be, I always think about how God is the perfect parent, and yet we make choices that go against how God instructed us. And so it's not always a parent's response, often it's not a parent's responsibility what their adult children decide to do.
I always found it encouraging to think about the fact that with that verse, parents can struggle with guilt if a grown child chooses to walk away from the Lord.
Mhm,
And, but like you were saying, every adult makes that choice for themselves. You don't inherit the faith. But what you're doing when you're training up that child in the way is you're making it harder for them to fall away. You know,
mhm,
they may choose to walk away from God at some point, but they have to overcome a lot to do that.
mhm,
They have to overcome all of that foundation that you've laid, the good example, the teachings, the faith that you modeled in your home. They have to overcome all of that to fall away.
mhm.
And so, it's heartbreaking when it happens if your children choose to turn their back on God. But, like you were saying, a proverb is not a guarantee. I brought them up so they never should have walked away from God. But you can know that you didn't make it easy for them to make that decision. If you neglect discipline, then it is easier for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. The next one is Proverbs 29:17 that says, correct your son, and he will give you comfort. He will also give delight to your soul. So when you look at the what correct means, to instruct someone, to chastise, to admonish someone, when we do that, it's not just good for them, but it's good for us. It provides that kind of home when, again, those boundaries, we know they know what to expect from us. And when they obey that and when they learn that, then it gives delight to our soul. And
Mhm.
there is something awesome when you see your child when they're growing and they're learning and you see them make a choice. It's so fun when they don't know you're watching and yet you see them making the right choice. So it will give delight to your soul and comfort. Proverbs 19:18, discipline your son while there is hope and do not desire his death. I had to laugh at that one a little bit. Do not desire his death. And I didn't read the context, so there may be more to it, but you've got to discipline your son early. You've got to discipline your children early while there is hope. Because if you wait too long, my father-in-law would always say, you got to get their attention early. And that made an impression on me because it makes it easier later on if you get their attention early. And we'll talk about how to get their attention a little bit later. Then okay, we have to talk about this. It's not fun, but you can't talk about discipline without talking about the controversy of spanking and whether or not that is good, bad, right, wrong. There's lots and lots and lots and lots more opinions about this. And what does the Bible have to say about it? There's a few passages that talk about the rod of correction. Proverbs 13:24. He who withholds his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him diligently. So there's two different statements there. If you withhold the rod, we can talk about what the rod is. And in a minute, we're going to talk about Psalm 23, that same word. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. You're with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So that same rod, that very same word that is spoken of, don't withhold it. When you look at the entirety of scripture, you understand that there's always, always, always love behind discipline. God doesn't discipline out of anger. I'm sure it talks about he was angry with the children of Israel, but it must have been, I know it had to have been frustrating to see this is so much that I had planned for you. This is what I wanted for you. This is what you could have. And yet you continually make these decisions. But back to the rod. The rod does not have to mean that you're beating your child. In fact, don't beat your child. That's not effective discipline. Proverbs 23:13-14, do not hold back discipline from the child. In this one, although you strike him with the rod, he will not die. You will strike him with the rod and rescue his soul from Sheol. And then Proverbs 22:15, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of discipline will remove it far from him. That rod, when you think about what a shepherd uses, the rod and the staff, it's not something that's beating the sheep. It's something that's, tapping. Did any of your kids do take part in FFA or ag where they showed animals in the ring? They have a little rod. It's thin, but it's a little long. I can't remember what it's called, and people are going to laugh at me. But they use that. They tap the pig or whatever animal it is to keep them in line, but they're not whipping them. They're just tapping them. Um, there's just a lot of different ways we can look at the rod without considering it as being a beating or a spanking. You can jump in anytime here when you want to talk about spanking. I have more to say, but if you have
I
something
whipped and spanked, so I don't know where you're going with this.
you whipped and spanked, is that what you said?
Yes, yes, I did. Yeah.
Well, a lot of us who come from years and years ago, well, you'll hear someone say, I had to go take my own switch off the tree out back. And that's what, I had to pick it myself. And I didn't ever have to do this personally because I you know,
You never got spanked.
well, yeah, I probably will talk about that in a minute, but um, there you had to choose carefully because if you chose it too thin, your dad would go outside and choose a thicker one, but you didn't want to pick one too thick. You didn't want it to hurt too much. But again, it was just different because there was, I don't want to say always, because there have been a lot of kids who have grown up and their discipline, their punishment was too harsh.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it was just understood for many, many years that spanking was always done out of love, always intended to be done out of love. Parents are not perfect. Your temper gets the best of you, and sometimes, we have regrets about that. You react rather than having your own self-control and your own self-discipline. And so, yes, of course, spanking can be done in a bad way, but that doesn't mean that it's always ineffective. That doesn't mean that it's wrong. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's key is, if you're feeling something right now that's keeping you from being self-disciplined, you have no business disciplining. It's just I think there's a big difference between I think if we're jumping ahead to this, I think there needs to be structure with discipline. And I'm saying I think this is all opinion. And, like you said, you're not reacting, you're disciplining. Children should know what to expect when they're being disciplined. It's not mom's flying off the handle and I don't know how she's going to come at me.
Yeah,
And there should be no chasing the kid around the house, and hauling him up and flailing on him and in your anger or, none of that is a part of discipline. That's reaction. And, I think children should know what to expect. If you're gonna say, this is what you do or this is what you don't do. And if they disobey, they're disciplined for it and they should know what that means in your house. And for us, it was the wooden spoon, you know. And when they were old enough, I made them go bring me the wooden spoon, and then they would get their spanking. And if they have to feel it. There's got to be a little sting there, or it's worthless. So if you're just kind of, patting them on their little diaper and they can't feel it, that's not going to be very effective. But I just feel like they should know what to expect. It's never I've told you 10 times and now I'm lost my temper and I'm frustrated and I'm just gonna start flailing. That's not discipline. That is beating, I think, in my opinion. To me, there's this huge difference.
yeah, yeah. Child abuse is what a lot of people will say spanking always is, and it is not always child abuse. Um,
Mhm.
it it is loving your child enough to discipline them, but yes, there are times when it can be child abuse. Uh, I had some thoughts written down about spanking. When is it appropriate? When is it appropriate? And I think, James 1 talks about praying for wisdom, and we should always begin every day parenting, begin every day anyway, asking God for wisdom because He'll give it to us. And just being able to acknowledge that I don't know, I don't know what I'm doing without you, God. I need your help raising my children. I want so much for my children to grow up and honor you, and how is the best way for me to do that? But
Mhm.
when is spanking appropriately? I think it always has to be done calmly. Always has to be done calmly. And was I mean that probably everybody's going, yeah, right. You're typically not calm when a child needs a spanking. When it gets to that point, we're frustrated. But we have to take a step back sometimes. And you're talking a week or two ago about wait till we get home, you know what's going to happen when we get home. And I think all of us who are of a certain age have been there. Either it's wait till your dad gets home, which I always felt bad because dads didn't want to come home to have to do that. But sometimes it was necessary. Or, I'm not going to spank you here at the church building, but when we get home. But I always thought that was a good thing with parenting because it gives you time to cool off. It
Mhm.
gives them time to think about why this is happening. And I think that it ends up being a lot less severe, if you want to use that word, because we've had time to cool off and think about it. And nobody wants to. There's not a good parent out there that really wants to spank their child. So it's got to be done calmly. It's got to be done with our ultimate self-control. We've got to be able to explain it, why this is necessary. And if they don't understand it, then it's not going to be effective. So, age appropriateness. And again, that this is kind of a matter of opinion. because every child is different. And then there has to be, I think, an immediate attempt afterwards to reconnect with your child. And I laugh about this now, but there was one time, and we lived in Corsicana, so I had to have been under 8. I probably was 7 or 8 years old, and my dad had told me, do not cross the street. It's just our little neighborhood, and I can't remember why I did, but I did. I crossed the street. And so I had to have a spanking, and I didn't get very many spankings, so it was kind of a big deal. But I had been openly defiant. I had done complete opposite of what he told me to do. And so I remember very specifically being in my room, and I don't remember the spanking itself, but I know it wasn't anything terribly harsh. But right afterwards, he wanted to play with me. He wanted me to get I had a little electric piano thing, and he was sitting there on the floor next to me trying to get me to play the piano with him. And I was like, I can't believe you were trying to be nice to me after you just spanked me. I just remember having this, I was hurt, but at the same time, why do I remember that so much? Because he was trying to reassure me of his love. And that that I think speaks volumes for parents who want to discipline their child and need to do it with a spanking. There has to be, I'm giving this, and this, and a lot of times it's not going to include all of those. But I think the main thing is there has to be calm. There has to be self-control on the part of the parent. Um, I think I'm going to say one more thing, and then I hope you'll jump in here too. I think we have to be careful not to see parenting through the lens of our own childhood always, because I think there have been a lot of people who have grown up. Maybe they were abused, physically abused by their parents. Maybe they had an authority figure who was harsh and abusive. And so they only see that form of discipline as it happened to them in their own childhood. And so it makes it hard to see the necessity of some discipline when they have their own children, because they think that it's going to be the exact same thing as what they experienced as a child. I don't know if that makes sense, but like for people who have been through a car accident and they don't want to drive anymore, they don't want their children to drive because they had a car accident. That same thing's not going to happen, most likely to their child, but they still need to learn to be independent. They still need to learn to drive and do these things. So I guess I'm saying don't let our fear of we have to be careful or pray about it, of course, not to let the lens of our own childhood affect everything about how we parent. Of course, it's going to affect us in some ways, but not to determine it.
Yeah, when I think about spanking and, discipline with the idea of spanking taking place, I think about words like consistency and persistency, because that's so frustrating. Parents always talk about frustration. That word comes up a lot when it comes to discipline, on the behalf of the child and the parent. There can be a lot of frustration. And I think the frustration is worse when there's no consistency, and that the kid never knows. Sometimes I get a spanking for this and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I get in trouble and sometimes I don't. And they don't know what to expect. And so they're always going to be pushing the buttons. Sometimes no means no, and sometimes it
Yeah.
doesn't. There needs to be consistency and then persistency, because foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. And I think sometimes it's so easy as a parent to want to give up and say, well, spanking doesn't work because they still pitched a fit, or they still did this, or they still did this. Well, that's because foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. You just have to, it's like anything worthwhile takes long-term consistency and persistency and discipline in it. That's what the word means. And so remembering those two things, when it can be frustrating as a mom. I feel like we keep going over the same thing and I keep having to address the same thing. But at some point, they'll straighten out. And
Mhm.
at some point, you'll be able to look back on all this and say it was hard. And I think personalities play a part in that. You had 3 boys. I'm sure they weren't all the same. And our 3 boys definitely weren't all the same. And just about every household where there's multiple children, you'll have one who's really strong-willed. And you're like, I feel like I spank this child all the time. And then you'll have one where the very idea of getting a spanking is enough to make them not do it, you know?
Mm,
And so you're working with different personalities and you want to keep that in mind. Um, and then the only other thing I'll say about it is I always think it's important to remember that there should be a purpose for it, and is it to instruct that when we say no, we mean no? Is it to let them know that these are our household rules for a reason, and if you break them, you will be punished? They should know what the spanking is for. They should never be wondering what just happened. Why did I get that? Why, that there should be a purpose for it. And that makes it training and instruction and discipline. Again, not just a reaction in
right.
anger or frustration.
Yeah. And like you said, personality plays a part. And there are some kids that it really does not. It's not the most effective punishment. I mean, I think it can always be effective, but it's not the most effective. And you've got to figure out what it is that works with your child and then be persistent in that. John has there's a one instance that he remembers so well with one of our boys that he has so much regret about. He was so frustrated about something that had happened. And I mean, he literally has had bad dreams about it. And he has talked to that son and apologized numerous times. And that son, well, he looks at John and like, I have no memory of that. I don't remember it at all. And so John and I were talking about this the other day, why it hurts John's heart and he can't seem to, just let it go, and why this particular son doesn't remember it. Because I think they lived in an atmosphere of love. And that instance may have been severe in John's memory, but because our kids knew that we were consistently going to love them, consistently going to encourage them, consistently going to provide the kind of instruction and discipline that they needed. It didn't scare him because he knew his dad. He
Mhm.
knew uh, that he was loved and he knew that this was for his own good. So providing that kind of environment for your kids,
Mhm.
if you're going to use that form of punishment, and I think both of us agree that it is a necessary form of punishment, but if you're going to use that, then they have to know. They have to know that they are loved and that it's not it's not because you're mad at them. It's not because well, it's just not because you're mad at them. It's because they need to learn some discipline. So, um, yes, spanking is appropriate, not in every situation, but prayerfully asking for wisdom, very, very carefully. That's where both of us land on that subject. So let's move away from that and talk about a few other things. Um, Discipline, you can't parent biblically or practically without discipline. It just has to be done. And so I think that there are several different ineffective parenting styles that I'll bring up briefly, and you can add to them if you want to. The first one that is very important is not the right word. The one that bothers me so much and makes me so sad is passive parenting. And I think at some point or another, we're all going to be passive in our parenting because we're exhausted and you're sitting there thinking that's the seventh time I've told them not to do that. I'm worn out. I can't do it again. And yet we can't afford to be passive about it. It's like you've been saying, consistency really is the key. But when we are too lazy, and maybe it's not the seventh time, maybe it's just the second time, and we're too lazy to get up and take care of it, that's passivity. And we just can't do that. We can't afford to be lazy in our parenting styles. Uh, Permissive parenting. I think about sometimes we laugh and giggle when a little girl is sassy. And there are some funny things that happen, and we kind of have to laugh behind our hands because if we laugh and encourage certain things from our kids, then it begins a pattern that's not a good pattern. So you have to think long term. Don't let your mind stay right here at 2 years old and oh, how cute that is. It is cute, but it's not going to be cute when they're 16. It's really not going to be cute when they're 25. So being permissive, it's a way that we can develop patterns that we will regret later. There's a something that John and I came across from Steve Farrar. There's a book called King Me about parenting. And it's a document that we came up with, and most of it's from Steve Farrar, but it's about authority versus authoritarianism. So if a parent is an authoritarian, it means that they are rude, they're abusive, retaliatory, easily threatened by disagreement, they're unpredictable, and you've been talking about predictability. It focuses on their faults, it's stingy with praise. There's all this list of things about an authoritarian, whereas we should be an authority. Someone who's an authority is kind and thoughtful and consistent and approachable. That's a big one. Consistent, encouraging, generous. So I'll share this document next week, but I think a lot of times we grow up thinking that a parent has to be an authoritarian, but we need to be an authority, but be careful with how we use that authority. Then the other one that I thought of is being reactionary, just a reactionary parent, where you just react to everything rather than thinking ahead. And what might how can I handle when my child acts this way? And we recognize patterns when they start to appear rather than reacting all the time. How can we be proactive in our parenting? So, do you have anything to add to those ineffective parenting styles?
No, I love how you can look at specific things and it's going to fall under one of those headings, and I don't have anything to add.
Okay. So, let's spend the rest of the time, and I don't know how much time we have, but
We've been talking about
effective,
an hour, I think.
we already have.
Mhm.
Okay,
I
let's
wrote
just,
down 10:20, so when we
okay.
started.
Whew, maybe we should have split this into two, but let's just quickly go through some effective parenting, not necessarily styles, but how to be an effective parent. To me, one of the most important ones is to begin with the end in mind. And we've heard about this with regard to other important things in life, but begin with the end in mind. And when you have a child, I don't know about you, but I remember when I thought about having a baby, I thought about just having a baby. I wanted this little baby, this little person. But then as they grow a little more, you realize that hopefully we know this ahead of time, but you've been blessed with this little soul to guide. And it's not just having a baby, it's having a child that God trusted you to have, to guide, to grow, to mold. And what are you going to teach them? I think so much of the time we talk about what they're going to be when they grow up. I want them to be a doctor. I want them to be a lawyer. I want them to be this or that. But do we talk about who we want them to be? What kind of character? Are we teaching character and self-control and responsibility and respect for authority and humility and all of those things? So beginning with the end in mind, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's biblical. I think that's what all those verses were about that you read in the
Mm,
very beginning, and most of them have a reason, and the outcome, and here's why you don't want to do this way, and here's why you do want to do it this way, and that's the whole point is, and when he is old,
mhm.
he will not depart from it. It's beginning with the end in mind.
Yeah. Another one is thinking about our leadership style. This was something that we came across that I thought was so interesting that shepherds in the East lead their flocks. They lead from the front. They're tending to them, they're caring for them, they're showing them the way to come behind them. They know them by name. It's so interesting watching a shepherd over there in Israel and how they'll just be surrounded. They'll make a little noise. It sounds like a raspberry. They blow a raspberry, and then the sheep just surround them. And even if you, anyway, I'll digress. We don't have time to do that. But is that our leadership style to lead from the front, or are we more like a Western shepherd that drives our sheep? Are we driving our children? Sometimes we have to push them from behind, encourage and push. But I think it's more effective to lead from the front. How are we going to lead our kids? I think that we have to do some examination and determine if we are a pushover. Were you a pushover?
I didn't think I was.
Would your boys say now, looking back, that you were?
No, not about things I knew about. I like I said, I found out later there were things that happened that I didn't know anything about. And I wrote an article a few years after we became empty nesters called Things I Learned About Parenting After Our Kids Left Home.
Yeah.
And part of that was at one point Carl actually used the word clueless
Oh,
to describe me. And so that's what made me, rethink some things. Like you may think that I think what I drew from that is, there can never be too much communication,
yeah.
always talking and touching base and things like that. But the things that I knew about, I wouldn't say I was a pushover about.
Yeah. I just think that it's good for us to think about how are we react as we go along. Maybe have a self-evaluation every year. Think about how am I handling this year of my child's childhood? Am I putting up with too much arguing or back talking, that kind of thing? Um, so what do I need to discipline in myself before I can effectively discipline my children? Then the fourth one is consistency. You've talked about that. Your kids are not going to take you seriously if you're not consistent. And then just the very last part, just practically speaking. Um, and these are just some things that I remember. I remember when my oldest was a little bitty baby and when he would toddle over to the bookshelf and I was trying to teach him not to touch certain things and I would, pop his hand. And I noticed after a while that when I would start getting close to him, he would kind of flinch. He would his little eyes would blink. Not all the time, but when he was getting close to something he wasn't supposed to touch. And that hurt my heart, killed me for him to flinch when I came near. And so I started thinking, is there, what can I do differently that he's not afraid of me, but yet he knows that I'm disciplining him. And so there were some different things that I remember thinking about, thumps, a little thump, just a redirection rather than whacking them on the hand. I'm just, I think, confessing about that because I still remember that little face flinching when I got near to him. But he had to be taught, he had to be disciplined, even at such a young age. And I also thought about in worship, I don't know how you handled this, but when they'd start talking, if you just pop them or if you say shh, I don't think they quite understand at first. So I would just touch, kind of tap them on their mouth so that they would know this is not a time to talk. And that was, I think, pretty effective. How did you handle noise in worship?
Well, if they wouldn't be quiet, I'd take them out and spank them and bring them back in. And we didn't take them out and play, we took them out and brought them back in. But there were times when if they were misbehaving in worship, I would either pinch them under their arm, like that little tender place at the armpit there,
Yeah.
or between the legs, which
Uh-huh.
most of the time was just pretty effective, but every now and then one of them would be like, oh, yeah,
Pinch me.
ow.
Yeah. 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 Certain. I do remember having to do some of those things. And while you're talking about not letting them play when you take them out, that's passive parenting right there. If you just go and let them play, that's being passive or permissive. Then taking away something that they want. I think Micah, I heard him the other day tell Livy, I'm going to have to put your Elsa dress up for a week if you don't stop doing that. And that is, I mean, she lives in that Elsa dress. So, that's a duh. Everybody knows you take things away. But I also remember one time that John told the boys, you can't watch TV for a week. And I was like, hang on now. That's going to affect me. Back in the day when TV was not what it is now, but they had like an hour in the afternoon that they could watch whatever it was. I don't remember. But so be careful that you're on the same page, parents, when you take something away, that it's not going to affect the other parent. What about timeout? How do you feel about timeout?
We used it occasionally. We were more spankers than timeouters. So, but I had boys, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't remember using timeout very much. I don't think it was very effective,
yeah.
but
I didn't time out and I didn't count time either.
right.
And, we never counted in our house. I mean, I don't think that's a thing now. I don't feel like I ever see that anymore. But I remember that was like some moms would say, I'm gonna count to 10.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because to me, that's just, you're teaching again when I say no. it means no,
Right.
and so we always said delayed obedience is disobedience.
Yeah, that is true. All the way. One of our boys says all the way, right away. We
Yeah.
expect
Oh,
you to
that's
obey all
good.
the way, right
Mhm.
away.
Mhm.
Um, there's some other things like there were times that our boys had to write sentences, and I think I've talked about that on here. And it wasn't just, I will not hit my brother, but it would be some long sentence that was, I will treat my brother that he is in the image of God. I mean, it would be a long sentence, but it would be positive so that they'd be learning something good. Um, Making discipline fit the offense, like if they scribble on the wall, they've got to clean the wall. Obviously that's something to me that's pretty obvious. One of the things that I thought about that I've seen happen is being grounded from everything, including youth devotionals and spiritual events. And I think that's not something ever we should do, to ground them from a youth devotional, or that they need that. So think about your priorities and where you want them to be grounded from certain events, but not from things that they really need to be at. To me, that's like grounding them from worship. So careful about that. Um, when they're older, so we'll end with this. When they're older, which is more, I remember Dad saying, he wrote an article years ago, the diapers were the easy part. So there's that easy discipline that doesn't feel easy at the time, where you have to be consistent and redirect and spank and do these little things that are exhausting. But then when they get older, it's just the not maybe the consequences is the right way of saying it. I don't know, but it's just bigger and harder, and it hurts your heart more, and it's more longer reaching than those little things when they're infants and small children. We had something that we did occasionally at the dinner table. We would say, okay, you can say anything respectfully, you can ask any question as long as you do it respectfully. So if they disagreed with a decision we had made, if they had a problem with something that we had said or done with regard to their discipline or their correction, at this certain time, you are allowed to be respectful about it, but to question us. And then we would do what we could to answer their questions. But we would always follow it with, do you know? Do you know that we love you? Do you know that you can trust us? And John and I had different opinions. I feel like you shouldn't ask them that. I think you should just say, you know you can trust us. We know that you love us, because I think when you ask them, I think they feel like they've been kind of put in the corner and might not want to say the truth, but that's neither here nor there. But being able to question you, I think is important, as long as it's done respectfully and as long as it's done when you allow it. Now, if they're being disrespectful or just being disrespectful is not acceptable. So we wrote letters occasionally when things would happen. We it's easier for me to communicate that way, and I can put my heart out there when I was trying to explain to them why we came to a decision about something, and we would send them letters, and then we would talk about it with them. And then the only other thing that I will add is that sometimes friendships, your own friendships, will come into play when it comes to something going on with your kids, because they have kids your kids' age. And sometimes you have to do things that are hard with your friends to protect your child. And I think that sometimes comes up, that your kids' well-being, your child's uh, soul is more important than your own friendship. And your friendships will survive if you take care of them, but your priority has to be your child. So those are just some practical things that I thought of.
Hmm. That's really good. I think if I was a parent starting over again, some things that would have encouraged me would be if you're told ahead of time, it is going to be hard and exhausting. And I think I've mentioned on here before that my mom had already always said, just be consistent, just be consistent. And so I thought parenting was easy as long as you're consistent. And it's not, it's just hard, because your child may look at you like you're the meanest person in the world when you have to spank them or discipline them, and or they may give you that little scowl like you've just hurt their soul, and or they may keep pushing the same buttons because one of these times they might get away with it. Just I think knowing that in advance that this is so normal. for your children to be unhappy with the fact that you're disciplining them, I think it takes away some of that second guessing that we do as moms. Am I being too harsh? Am I being too, how come they haven't learned this lesson already? Or maybe I shouldn't. I think it's so easy to second guess when our children react in a way that seems painful or negative in the moment, but they're going to because they're children and they
Mhm.
don't understand and they don't have the end in mind and they can't see the big picture. So I think as a young mom, it would be encouraging for me to know there will be times when it's exhausting because you have to be consistent with it. There will be times when your children are going to act like you're killing them, even though you're not. Even though you're not. I'm not saying, I'm not talking about beating your kids, but when discipline done right, they will still act like you're killing them, and it's so unfair. And you're not. But so know that going in, that children they're not old enough to understand you're disciplining, you're training. And so there'll be times when they'll make you feel bad. It would encourage me to know that kids are smart and they can see inconsistencies and they can figure things out and they know how to play parents against each other. So be careful about that. Make sure you and your spouse are always on the same page, and don't undermine. If your husband has said something, even if you agree or not, especially in front of the kids, don't undermine that. Don't go back and change that around. Well, I know he said you couldn't do this, but it's okay. Because kids are smart and they can see the inconsistency there. So um, I think those are some of the things that just know going in, there will be times when it'll probably be hard and you'll be questioning everything about your parenting. But keep praying, keep seeking God's wisdom, keep being consistent, and like I said, I feel like on the other side of things, you are always doing the best that you can with what you know in your
Mhm.
home with your kids.
Mhm.
And God will fill in the gaps. God loves them more than you do. God's grace will, get them through and then you can laugh about some of the other things when they're gone.
Yeah, for sure. And when they grow up and become parents, then their eyes are open to, maybe they might look back on some questionable decisions you made, but they'll realize that, oh, this isn't as easy as I thought it was when I had all the answers when I was 14. And
Yeah.
speaking of, if things that we should know going into it, I've heard young women say, don't discourage me by saying it's hard. I'm sorry, but it is hard. It's
Yeah.
hard, and you're gonna have to go through some hard things. We're not being discouraging, we're just being truthful about that. But we're also saying that you've got the answer. You've got God's guidebook. You've got resources, and choose your resources wisely. Find an older woman that at your congregation that you trust, and maybe you just need to spill your guts and say, I'm having struggles with this. Maybe you don't need advice, but someone to just bounce things off of is always helpful. So
I think knowing ahead of time that there are going to be hard moments with discipline, I mean, that's what Hebrews is all about when he says no discipline is joyful in the moment, helps you fortify and prepare for it and pray about it ahead of time, knowing that and it's a choose your hard situation like we've talked on here before. It's hard in the moment, but it'll be even harder if you don't discipline. And in that article I wrote on things I learned after the fact, after the kids left home, um, is that one of the things I said was I wasn't a perfect parent, but I was a praying parent.
mhm,
And sometimes, especially you mentioned how different it is now, I can't imagine. We had our family, and the only other families we had to compare how we parented, our parenting style or our kids' behavior were the ones that we actually saw. You
yeah,
know? People that were in our family or in our church family or in our school system or whatever, it's like real people. And now, moms have so many things to compare
mhm,
their children to, their parenting style, they're all the different things coming in, like you said. But God has laid the burden of responsibility on your shoulders for your children, and all He wants is that you do your best to turn those little souls back over to Him. That's it,
yeah,
and like you say, keep that home filled with love, seeking God's wisdom, be consistent, and there will be hard moments, but still looking back, I know you feel the same way. you'd go back and do it all over again in a heartbeat because it's the most rewarding, beautiful experience.
Yeah. I go back and do it for an hour. No, I would go back. There's some things I would change for sure, but at the same time, I mean, that's how we learn. We've learned from mistakes and we do the best we can. And I love the way you put it. Just turn those children back over to God, make them into humans that belong to him and honor him. And the only other thing that I'll add, just because I've seen this, just because you can find a meme that says what you believe does not mean that that is the truth. Be careful of these memes that might say something that you feel very deeply, but yet it's not rooted in truth.
Mhm.
Always look to the Lord for your truth and not to the world. That's
Yeah.
just so
I think
foolish.
it's good to have these conversations, like you said in the very beginning, uncomfortable, because every home is different, but the principles laid out in God's word are the same.
Yeah.
And when I did a Bible marking topic on parenting, and at the very end, I started noticing what each of the verses addressed. Some of them talked about loving your children and providing for your children, but there were only one or two verses on those things, even though that's so important, of course.
Mhm.
But the vast majority of scriptures about parenting had to do with discipline and instruction. The vast majority of them. And I think it's just because those can be challenging, and we need to keep reminding ourselves this is our responsibility. It's not always easy, but this is important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most important things that we'll ever do. All right, good discussion. Thank you. We would love to hear, well, we hope we would love to hear your thoughts on discipline. Maybe we'll have a discussion next week, but so what's for dinner?
All right, first, I think last time on here I mentioned the crock pot idea of the baked potato and the chicken and
Yeah,
salsa situation. That turned out really good.
good.
Everybody loved it. And so the potatoes cooked through perfectly, and we opened them up and we topped them with that chicken that had been cooked with salsa. And then I had the toppings out, so you could put cheese or sour cream or chives or whatever on. That turned out really good. So I will say that. But for tonight, we're going to try this recipe I found that uses ground turkey, because we're Weight Watchers. But this one is it's a skillet recipe, and it's ground turkey and potatoes and curry. I forget what else is going to be in there. So I'm gonna try that and see how that goes.
I'm not a big curry fan. I know you brought up sweet potatoes, and I said I'm not a sweet potato fan.
I was just gonna say, I feel like every time I talk about the food we're eating, you don't like it.
No, and yet you're the one that brought up the one that I made last week, the chicken and broccoli and orzo. But I think I've never had anything that you cooked that I didn't like, so I probably just haven't had it done very well. It's not curry is not something that I'm drawn to, but I've not had it all that much. But anyway, um, we it's Wednesday, so we'll have dinner at the building, but I have a ham in the oven right now. I like to cook those just to pieces, and then I'm going to make some of those ham and cheese sliders to take to Jordan and Aaron's this weekend so that we'll just have something to eat on. But I'm going to use Gouda cheese instead of Swiss. Usually that recipe calls for ham and
Mhm.
Swiss. So I'm going
Yeah,
to use
that
Richmond
reminds
butter.
me. The favorite things party, we're supposed to bring something sweet or savory. And I ran across this idea. I'm gonna try it. It'll probably fail, probably be a big Pinterest fail. But instead of doing chocolate dipped strawberries, you do chocolate chips and strawberry salsa. So you chop up the strawberries really, really finely and mix it with a little sugar to where it looks like salsa. And
Mhm.
then you use chocolate chips and a little bit of coconut oil, melt it all together, and then you drop it onto make little discs out of them on wax paper and stick them in the fridge until they're hardened. And you dip that, so it's chocolate chips, like chips and salsa. It's chocolate chips and strawberry salsa. You dip that in the straw. So I'm gonna try that. I'll let you know how it goes.
That sounds promising.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have something good for me?
I do. Gary and Chelsea were in California for a week, and one of their layovers was in Arizona, and they brought me back this jar of tea mix called Desert Tea, which I'd never heard of before. It's similar to, have you ever had like a Russian tea, like at the holidays? Some people make that Russian tea that it's a powdered mix that you mix with hot water. It's similar to that, except it has It's got orange, apple, lemon, tangerine, lime, dried teas, and just a tiny bit of sugar and then spices. And you can drink it hot or cold, but a whole mug of it only has 20 calories, which is why I like it. And it tastes really, really good. So even though we're on Weight Watchers, I can have this. Anyway, it tastes really good. And I wanted to make sure I could look it up and see if anybody, because they got it in the airport. So I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure if I shared it on here that people could actually get it, and they can. But it was so funny because I put in desert tea and it kept trying to change it to dessert tea. Are you trying to look up dessert tea? And I'm like, no, I know how to spell. But I
So
did
good.
find it. So it's delicious, and I'll share a link.
Good. Well, I feel kind of bad because you're sharing all these Weight Watchers friendly, and this is not
You know,
my
it's
side.
all about balance. Some people will be
Well,
interested in what I'm sharing, and most people will be interested in what you're sharing.
well, have you? I've talked about these before, but
Mhm.
I wasn't sure you could get them anywhere besides down here because El Patio is an Austin restaurant, but El Patio tortilla chips are the best tortilla chips. I don't know how to describe them other than crispy, crunchy. They're just the best. When you go, if you live in Texas, you know what I'm talking about. We judge our Mexican restaurants based on chips and salsa that they bring out. And the best chips I've ever had at any restaurant come from El Patio. And now they have them that you can buy in the store. So I know that you can get them in Colorado. I don't know how far north it goes. So hopefully, or maybe hopefully not, you can find them because
That's right.
they're not good for you, but they are delicious.
Yum.
Yeah. Sorry about that. All right. It was a kind of a hard conversation, but it was a good conversation and it was necessary, I think. And thank you to the woman who asked about it, kind of pushed us into talking about it when neither one of us really exactly wanted to. And it wasn't, how we talk about you have to feel it. I don't
Mm.
know that I was really feeling it, but I knew that we just needed to do it, needed to talk about it. Not that we are experts on anything, um, but it was good for me to hear what you had to say about it too. So thanks for your input. If you are new to Looking Up, we would love for you to check us out we have a Facebook group called Looking Up with Kathy and Carla. We have a YouTube page that has all of the past well, not all of them, I think all but the first three or four videos that we have done for this podcast. This is season 7. I think this is episode 6 or something like that. So there's lots of previous episodes if you want to go check out and see what we've talked about in the past. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate every one of you and we will pray for you. We really do pray for you to continue to look up at the Lord and see the Lord and see the good that He has in this world. And we're just grateful for you. So thanks for joining us. And Kathy, I love you and I value what you have to say. And until next time.
Keep looking up. I love you too, friend.